In a small village tucked away in the serene hills of northern Thailand, there was a house that stood on the edge of a quiet, mist-filled forest. The locals often spoke in hushed tones about the house, a place that once belonged to a young woman named Suda. Suda was known for her beauty and grace, her laughter echoing through the village like the sweet melody of a bird's song. She was deeply loved by everyone, and her marriage to a kind-hearted man named Anant was a joyous occasion that the entire village had looked forward to for years. But, just days before the wedding, tragedy struck. Anant, the love of her life, was involved in a terrible accident. The villagers said it was a cursed night, the night when the spirit of the forest was said to roam freely. Anant was returning home from a nearby market when he met his tragic end. The accident was sudden, and the cause was never truly explained. Some claimed it was the work of malevolent spirits, others whispered that it was simply fate. Whatever the reason, the result was the same: Anant was dead. Suda was left shattered, her heart broken beyond repair. She could not bear the thought of living without him. The wedding preparations came to a halt, and the joyous mood that had filled the village quickly turned into sorrow. Suda spent her days in the empty house, lost in grief. Her nights were restless, filled with the sounds of her sobbing and calling out Anant's name into the darkness. But her mourning did not go unnoticed. It was said that when a person grieves too deeply, they invite spirits from the other side to visit. And one night, as the moon hung heavy in the sky, a strange presence filled Suda's home. She was sitting by the window, staring out into the darkness, when she felt it, an icy chill that seemed to come from nowhere. The hair on the back of her neck stood up, and she turned to see the silhouette of a figure standing in the doorway. This figure was not Anant. No, it was something darker, something ancient, and something far more unsettling. Suda's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the shadow in the doorway. The figure was tall, almost unnaturally so, and its shape was indistinct, as if it were made of shadows themselves. The air around it seemed to pulse with an eerie energy, as if the very atmosphere was being twisted by its presence. Suda's heart raced in her chest, her grief momentarily forgotten as she tried to comprehend what she was seeing. The figure remained silent, motionless, yet its presence was suffocating, as though it were watching her, waiting for her to react. For a moment, Suda considered screaming, running, doing anything to escape the feeling of dread that had suddenly settled over her. But instead, her eyes locked with the shadowy form, and a strange calmness washed over her. It was as if some unspoken force was compelling her to stay still, to remain in its gaze. Who are you?" she whispered, her voice trembling with both fear and curiosity. The figure did not answer. Instead, it slowly raised its arm, pointing a long, slender finger towards Suda. The air grew colder still, and the faintest sound could be heard, a soft, haunting whisper that seemed to echo in her mind. "Suda, come to me." The voice murmured, but there was something wrong with it, as if it was not fully human. The words had an unnatural echo, reverberating in her skull. Suda blinked, and in that instant, the figure moved. It was no longer standing in the doorway. Now, it was just inches from her, its form becoming clearer as it stepped into the dim light of the room. The figure was not human at all. Its face was a smooth, pale mask, but its eyes, they were dark pits, as though staring into the very abyss of despair. The figure's features were androgynous, yet its presence was unmistakably female, exuding an aura of mourning and loss. Suda recoiled, but the figure reached out with cold, icy hands and touched her forehead gently. The touch was like ice, sending a shiver of fear through Suda's entire body. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she could feel her pulse quicken. The figure's coldness seeped into her, filling her with a sense of overwhelming sorrow. It was as if the grief she had been feeling all along was now personified, standing before her, offering her an eternity of suffering. "You are not alone in your mourning," the figure whispered. "Come with me, and you will never be alone again." Suda's mind spun, confusion clouding her thoughts. Who was this entity? What did it want from her? Was it the spirit of the forest? A demon? Or perhaps something even older and more ancient? The figure's gaze softened, and the sadness in its eyes mirrored Suda's own grief. "I have waited for you, Suda," it said, its voice now gentle, coaxing. I am the spirit of eternal mourning. I have wandered for centuries, seeking those who mourn as I do. We are kindred spirits, you and I. Suda felt herself drawn to the figure. Suda's heart raced in her chest, a mix of fear and a strange sense of comfort spreading through her. The figure in front of her radiated an aura of deep sadness, but also something far more enticing, an invitation to escape her unbearable grief. For a moment, she hesitated. Her mind was clouded, swirling with the pain of losing Anant, the overwhelming sadness that had ruled her life for days, weeks, perhaps even longer. The idea of joining this spirit, of ending the cycle of torment that had consumed her, seemed like a release from the endless sorrow that weighed her down. Yet, somewhere deep inside her, a small, flickering thought resisted. Was this truly the answer? Was it right to abandon the world of the living, the world where Anant had once walked beside her, where their love had bloomed and flourished? The figure seemed to sense her hesitation. It stepped closer, its icy presence growing stronger, enveloping Suda in a coldness that seeped into her bones. The whisper in her mind grew louder, more urgent. You do not need to suffer alone, the spirit coaxed, its voice like the soft rustling of leaves in the wind. You can join me. Together, we will mourn forever, together we will grieve for the lost. You will find peace in my embrace, Suda. Your sorrow will never leave you, but I can make it bearable. Suda closed her eyes, the overwhelming pain of loss flooding her mind. She could still feel the sharp ache of Anant's absence. The nights she had spent waiting for his return, the days she had spent locked in her home, staring at the empty chair where he once sat, everything came rushing back in a flood of emotion. And then, in that moment, something shifted inside her. The thought of never having to face the world alone again, of being surrounded by this spirit who seemed to understand her pain, almost seemed like a blessing. For the first time since Anant's death, she felt the weight of her sorrow lift ever so slightly. The figure's words offered her the one thing she had been yearning for, an end to the loneliness, a way to hold on to her grief without facing the emptiness of the world without him. Suda reached out a trembling hand, her fingers brushing against the coldness of the spirit's hand. I want to be with him again, she whispered, the words barely escaping her lips. The spirit's expression softened, and the corners of its mouth curled upward, as if satisfied with Suda's decision. You will be with him, it promised, the words filled with a deep, mournful reverence. We will walk together in the world of mourning, in the realm where all lost souls reside. Your love for Anant will never fade, Suda. Come with me, and your heart will never break again. With that, the spirit extended its hand fully, guiding Suda into its cold embrace. The room seemed to darken as the temperature plummeted, the walls growing distant and the outside world fading away. Suda felt herself being drawn in, the sorrow and despair of her life now merging with the spirit's eternal grief. As her hand touched the spirit's, a flood of emotions overwhelmed her, a mixture of profound sadness, longing, and the strange, inexplicable sense that she was stepping into another world entirely. The moment Suda's hand fully connected with the spirit's, everything around her seemed to dissolve. The house, the village, the world she had once known, all of it faded away, leaving nothing but an endless darkness that seemed to stretch on forever. She felt weightless, as though she were drifting through the air, but there was no sense of time, no sense of direction. The coldness around her intensified, wrapping around her like a suffocating fog. Yet, even in the vast emptiness, the spirit beside her remained a constant presence, its pale form a beacon in the darkness. You are no longer bound to the mortal world, the spirit whispered, its voice like a distant echo. This is the realm of eternal mourning. Here, time does not pass, and sorrow is everlasting. Suda looked around, trying to make sense of what was happening. But there was nothing to see, nothing to grasp onto. The space was like a void, an infinite stretch of nothingness where only the cold and the darkness existed. But then, as if summoned by the spirit's words, figures began to appear. They were shadowy, indistinct forms, each one carrying an aura of grief and despair. They were people, lost souls, spirits who had wandered into this realm long ago. Some were weeping softly, others stood motionless, their faces blank with the weight of their sorrow. In the distance, Suda could hear soft sobs echoing in the void, but the voices were strange and disembodied, as though they came from the very air itself. "This is where I dwell," the spirit said, its voice no longer soothing, but cold and distant. "A place of endless mourning, where souls like yours come to rest. We mourn forever, but we are never truly at peace." Suda felt a chill run down her spine. These spirits were not at peace. They were trapped, bound by their grief, their sorrow. Suda stood frozen in the vast emptiness, her body trembling with the cold that now seemed to seep into her very core. The spirit had faded into the void, leaving her alone with the mourners. The dark figures moved around her in silence, some of them whispering to themselves, others weeping softly. She could feel their sorrow, a collective grief that hung in the air like a heavy fog. The weight of it pressed down on her, smothering her like a blanket of despair. At first, Suda tried to call out, but her voice felt distant, muffled, as though it could not reach the ears of the spirits. She tried to move, to escape, but no matter which direction she took, she only found more shadows, more mourners, trapped in their own sorrow. It was as though the void itself was closing in on her, trapping her in an endless cycle of grief. The faces of the spirits around her seemed familiar. Some had the same hollow look she had seen in the reflection of her own eyes in the days following Anant's death. But others were strange, distant figures she didn't recognize, ancient souls, their eyes hollow with the passage of time. Each of them had their own story of loss, of a love never to be reclaimed, of regrets that would never be undone. Suda realized that she was not the first to wander into this place of mourning, and she would not be the last. As she wandered deeper into the realm, a sense of unease grew within her. The soft whispers of the spirits became louder, and their presence began to feel overwhelming. They were not speaking to her, but their sorrow, so palpable, so raw, seeped into her being. The weight of their grief intertwined with her own, and she could feel herself slipping deeper into despair. The longer she stayed, the harder it became to distinguish her own emotions from those of the others around her. But then, through the murmur of voices, one figure stepped forward, a woman who appeared different from the others. Unlike the others, she was not shrouded in shadows, nor did she appear cold and distant. Her face was sorrowful, yet there was a strange warmth to her presence, an empathy that reached out to Suda. She was a woman, dressed in a simple white gown, her long hair falling in gentle waves around her shoulders. "You are new here," the woman said softly, her voice kind but filled with an underlying sadness. Suda nodded, too overwhelmed by the emotions surrounding her to speak. "I know what you are feeling," the woman continued, stepping closer. "I, too, was once like you. Grief can consume a soul, make you believe that there is no escape. But this place," she gestured around at the endless void, "is not what it seems." Suda looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" I thought I was meant to find peace here. I thought I was going to be with Anant again." The woman sighed, a deep, mournful sound. "You were tricked, just like so many others. The spirit you followed is not the only one that lures souls into this realm. There are others, more powerful beings, who seek to trap the grieving in this endless sorrow. They promise peace, but it is a lie." Suda's heart dropped. The words rang true. She had been blinded by her grief, too desperate to find peace in any form, to question what the spirit had truly offered her. "But how do I leave?" Suda asked, her voice shaking with desperation. "I can't stay here. I don't belong here." The woman's face softened with a sorrowful understanding. "Leaving is not simple. The only way to escape is to let go of your grief completely, to find acceptance in the love you once shared, not in the mourning you have allowed to consume you. It is the only way to break free from the chains that bind you to this place." "But how? How can I let go?" Suda whispered, her tears finally falling freely. "Anant. I can't just forget him. I can't just let him go." The woman looked at her with gentle compassion. "You do not need to forget him, Suda. You need to remember him in the light, not in the darkness. The love you shared was beautiful, and it is that love that will guide you back. But first, you must release the pain, or it will keep you here forever." Suda felt a weight in her chest, the heaviness of her sorrow. It was true. She had clung to her pain because she feared that letting it go would mean losing Anant forever. But maybe holding on to the grief was a way of holding on to the past, of refusing to accept that things had changed. Could she really let go of the pain? Could she truly accept the loss and move on, even if it meant stepping away from the endless mourning that had become her life? Suda stood there, the weight of the woman's words heavy in her heart. For the first time since entering the realm, she felt a flicker of something other than sorrow, something like hope. The idea of letting go of her grief was terrifying, but it was also the only way out. She realized that she had been holding on to her pain for so long, afraid that if she let it go, she would lose the only thing that kept Anant alive in her heart. But the woman was right. Grief had become her prison, and the more she clung to it, the more it isolated her, trapping her in a cycle of endless mourning. If she ever wanted to escape, she had to choose the path of acceptance. She had to remember Anant, not as a lost love, but as someone who had once been part of her life, someone who had made her happy and who would always live in her memories, but someone who was now gone. Suda looked at the woman, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resolve. How do I start? How do I let go of something that has been with me for so long? The woman smiled gently, her eyes full of compassion. It will not be easy. The pain will not vanish instantly. But it will lessen over time if you allow yourself to heal. Start by remembering the love you shared, not the pain. Think of the moments that brought you joy, the times when you and Anant laughed together, when you felt alive in his presence. Focus on those moments, and you will begin to see him in the light, not the darkness. Suda nodded, wiping away the tears that had been falling freely. She closed her eyes, and as she did, memories of Anant flooded her mind, his warm smile, the sound of his laughter, the way he would hold her close on cold nights. Those moments were still there, buried beneath the pain, waiting to be remembered. I remember, Suda whispered, her voice soft but full of conviction. I remember how much he loved me, how happy we were. I don't want to keep him in the darkness anymore. I want to remember him the way he was, alive and full of joy. The woman nodded, her face radiating with approval. That is the first step, Suda. You are no longer bound by the past, but free to move forward. Your love for Anant is not a burden, it is a gift. It is the love that will lead you back to the light. As Suda embraced the warmth of those memories, the coldness of the realm began to recede. The darkness that had once consumed her began to lift, replaced by a faint light in the distance. The mourners around her, once so lost in their grief, seemed to fade into the background, their sorrow no longer touching her in the same way. She had broken the cycle. The woman reached out and gently touched Suda's arm. You are ready, she said softly. The path back is open to you. Go now, and find your peace. But remember, the love you shared with Anant will always be a part of you, in the light and in the dark. Suda took a deep breath and turned towards the light, her steps sure and steady. The realm of eternal mourning, with its endless sorrow, faded into the distance as she walked toward freedom. With each step, the burden of grief lifted, and a sense of calm filled her heart. She wasn't leaving Anant behind, she was carrying his love with her, cherishing the beautiful moments they had shared. As she stepped into the light, she knew she had found her way back. And in that moment, she understood that true peace came not from escaping the pain, but from embracing the love that would never fade.